47 million people, 15% of the population, lives in poverty in this very wealthy capitalist society. Last year, a record number of 48 million people got food stamps, which, contrary to right-wing propaganda, is only $133 a month, which is about $1.40 a meal per person. And we'd like to all see Congress people live on that. Half of them were children in low-income families, many with working underpaid parents. The rest were seniors, people with disabilities, some unemployed adults, and veterans. Despite the food stamp, says the Department of Agriculture, 49 million people live in households where some members went hungry last year because they didn't have enough money to buy food, even though many of those numbers get food stamps. And even with the food stamps, many people just scrape by. Without the food stamps, millions more would face not only hunger, but increased heart disease, diabetes, children's asthma would get worse, and children's ability to concentrate and learn in school would be very affected. As it is, many parents, as the Times reported about a month ago, many parents skip meals so their children can eat. And in some rural areas, parents even go hunting for small game in order to feed their children. And for all of us of a certain age, the National Foundation to End Senior Hunger reports that 5 million of people over 60 do not get enough to eat. Mostly women, African Americans and Latinos, people living in rural areas, and others with low incomes. And by the way, Social Security, which many people live on, including many women, are not adequate for millions of people. And the right wing, as we know in the current shutdown, has its eyes on cutting Social Security benefits. So what happened of interest to us on September 19th in Washington? The House Republicans, in a vote of 217 to 210, voted to slash food stamp benefits by $40 billion over 10 years. If it passes in the Senate and becomes law, it would cut 4 million people, some say 6 million, out of this life-saving program. Cut off would be some veterans, unemployed adults who live in high-income areas still suffering from the recession, and many in low-income families where there are underpaid adults, and the children would also lose the food stamps, and they would also lose free school lunches. And many of unemployed people who can't find jobs would also lose benefits. Some state governments are already limiting food stamp eligibility, including in high unemployment areas, putting in tough qualifications and invasive tests like drug tests for people who apply. Additionally, some state stimulus program money, which was put into the budget in 2009, is expiring on November 1st, which means everybody's food stamp budget would be decreased by 13%, so a family of 4 would lose $36 a month for food. Within the House, Congress themselves, of course millionaires, many of them, increased the sums of money to agribusiness concerns and then separated food stamps from the farm bill so they could cut even deeper into food stamps. These are the same politicians who think nothing of spending thousands of dollars of workers' tax money on lavish dinners and parties and trips. Yet, for the poorest people and the unemployed, they're yelling fraud and abuse and telling the unemployed or underemployed to get a job, as if the economic crisis and lack of livable wage jobs were the fault of the workers. Those who represent the ruling class, the wealthiest, voted to increase hunger and suffering. They're trying to gut all essential safety net programs won by workers' movements, including unemployment insurance, so they can transfer more money to the banks through interest payments and bailouts while satisfying the Pentagon's budget, money for war and weapons. Right now, in the current standoff, the right wing is refusing to pay for women, infants, and children programs, for one, which feeds 9 million extremely poor women and their young children, largely babies, They've cut them off. These people have no other income, no way to support themselves. And WIC, by the way, from hearing it from a friend who got this a few years ago, it's very little. It's very, very little. And you're very limited in what you can buy. Now, what have the Democrats done here? They say they'll block the $40 billion cut. They voted against the House resolution cutting food stamps. They did. I checked the vote. Can our class trust them to fight this out and stand up to the right-wing millionaires? They already agreed in the Senate to cut $400 million a year over 5 years in food stamps. And let's not forget Democratic President Bill Clinton, who made a pact with the devil in 1996 when he signed the so-called Welfare Reform Act, rather the Welfare Destruction Act. Let's look at this law. It replaced public assistance with block grants to the states. It put a time limit on food stamps of 3 months out of 36 months for adults without children unless they work 20 hours a week. This really hurt unemployed workers and forced them into workfare programs at exploitation pay. Even calculating today's benefit of $133 a month, working 20 hours is less than minimum wage, and working more hours is much less. And many jobs don't materialize. So they've cut off they also cut off cash allowances, and the bill cut food stamp amounts and put in means tests. It cut off documented immigrants who'd been here for less than 5 years from getting food stamps. That Bill Clinton, what he signed did that. We can't let Clinton, who signed this atrocious bill, off the hook. He bragged at the Democratic National Convention, saying of the 1996, quote, reforms, removed millions of people off welfare. It left those living in poverty worse off than they were before, with benefits reaching fewer people, and those it reached giving them less money. Poverty rates began to rise again. And though the welfare rolls shrunk from 12.6 million to 4.6 million, the number of people in poverty grew by 7.4 million from 1981 to 1993, and the poverty went up to 15% of the population. Welfare reform led to a huge spike in extreme poverty, as defined by the number of households making under $2 a day. The Center on Budget and Policy Priorities said the official poverty rate declined in the early years of welfare reform when the economy was booming and unemployment was low, and it started increasing again in 2000, and the poverty level now exceeds the 1996 level. So now, less than 30% of poor families get public assistance, down from 70% in 1996. And the purchasing power is less than it was then, adjusting for inflation. So when the economy tanked, public assistance safety net was not there for most workers. In the current economy, it means when more workers are unemployed, public assistance barely exists, and in some states it actually fell. States have used block grants for other purposes to fill budget holes, not for public assistance and not for food stamps. The amount of money the federal government sent to states in block grants has been frozen for 16 years. And remember, even given the still high unemployment, the workfare requirements to get public assistance are still in place in many states, even though President Obama did grant some states waivers for that. However, unlike public assistance, the food stamp program grew during the recession. Since it began, the number of recipients went from 26 million to 48 million. And the millions of people who worked before the recession still can't find jobs, or can't find full-time jobs, or can only find very low-paying employment, and they need food stamps still. Yet the wealthiest 1% are waving around racist, sexist, and classist demagogy, blaming the workers for increasing food stamp allotment. While the recovery has helped the super rich, nothing has trickled down to the workers. And economic inequality, as Larry said, and our party says all the time in our paper, economic inequality has skyrocketed. This is the greatest income gap since the Great Depression. And as Larry also mentioned, with jobs, the statistic I see here is most jobs that have returned pay less than $13 an hour. The median income for workers' households fell more than 20% from 2000 to 2010. Many workers, underpaid workers, including those in the fast food industry, where profits are enormous. McDonald's alone brings in $1 billion a year. Many of them need food stamps. 14% of fast food workers who earn $9.65 an hour rely on food stamps to feed their children. This is why we we are supporting the struggle for a livable wage, for a $15 an hour minimum wage. We regard any cuts on the food stamp program an attack on the working class, especially the lowest income, who need food stamps to survive. We also regard as an attack on the working class and oppressed and are outraged by the Affordable Care Act's exclusion of at least 8 million people, mostly very underpaid workers, African American, Latino, and single mothers, many in the South. They live in the 26 states where the government the state governments refuse to expand Medicaid, which the same Supreme Court gave them permission to do, and they earn, quote, too much, that's very hard to believe, to buy health plans on the exchanges and get federal subsidies. This is a health plan only a capitalist country with greedy corporate insurance companies could come up with. And of course, the Supreme Court, the reactionary court, gave states the right to cut out millions of underpaid workers. The government would even pay for the Medicaid expansions, but these racist anti-worker governors and legislatures won't allow poor people to access health care. Refusing to expand Medicaid are all the states in the Deep South, except for Arkansas, but also Ohio, Pennsylvania, and New Hampshire. They're excluding workers like cashiers, cooks, nurses' aides, sales clerks, waiters, custodial workers, housekeepers, and so on. We say that Congress must find a way to include all of these workers in the health care plan. Let's just say that Democrats do what they say they will. They fight the cuts in the SNAP food assistance. The current crisis doesn't encourage that idea, but let's say they do it. If they were serious, they would really fight the food stamp cuts. They would filibuster, like Senator Wendy Davis did in Texas, with tons of mass support and a people's filibuster going on. They would do that. They would call out allies, and they would call out unions and women's groups and retirees and community groups to come in and support them in the filibuster. They could refuse to any cutbacks or compromises. They could walk out together en masse during the deliberations. That's what we would do, a communist party, but we would take over the food companies and give everybody free food. We know that although this is hidden, we know the food stamp program was won through struggle. The first one was 1939 to 1943 as a result of the mass struggles during the Depression. In 1964, the Food Stamp Act was enacted along with Medicaid, Head Start, and the Job Corps, not because Lyndon Johnson was a benevolent president. He wasn't. He was one of the most racist ever. And only the mass movements, especially the very strong civil rights movement, pushed the government so hard that these federal programs were enacted. Our party has supported the struggles for food assistance. We've even signed on to or initiated lawsuits demanding the government release surplus food, and we won them. And under the slogan, "Food is for people, not for profits," we initiated free distributions of surplus produce. In the early 70s, party members in Women United for Action in Buffalo obtained tons of surplus apples and potatoes donated by farmers who couldn't make a profit. They distributed the food free to the unemployed, those hit by plant closings, wage freezes, and price hikes. Workers' World demands that SNAP benefits, Meals on Wheels, which has also been cut way back, and women, infants, and children programs should not be cut but expanded. We know it took strong, unified struggles to win these benefits, and a fight back would unite the forces who could stop the cutbacks. Under capitalism, food is a commodity. Although it is plentiful everywhere you look, on farms, in stores, on restaurant tables, millions of people still can't afford to buy it. There is more than enough to satisfy everyone's health and nutritional needs, and even environmentalists say if the population increases, all the people can be fed. We say food is a right, and every person is entitled to sufficient nutritious food. Ultimately, food should be free, as it would be in a socialist society, because it's a basic human right.